The warning klaxons had been screaming for 3 days straight. Not a moment of silence, not a breath of respite. 30 billion human lives compressed into a crescendo of impending extinction. Captain Miranda Reyes stood motionless in the command center of humanity's last hope, a facility buried 7 kilometers beneath the Atacama Desert. Around her, holographic displays flickered with a kaleidoscope of catastrophic data. Red indicators cascaded like digital blood, marking the progressive collapse of Earth's defensive networks. The collective had been methodical, brutally, impossibly efficient. It began 18 months ago when the first alien probes appeared at the edge of the solar system. Humanity had celebrated initially, first contact, the ultimate scientific dream. But these were no ambassadors of peaceful exploration. They were harbingers of systematic annihilation. The initial assault had been surgical. Communication networks collapsed first. Global positioning systems became weapons, turning navigation into a deadly maze. Transportation grids transformed into killing fields. Within weeks, major metropolitan areas became graveyards of technological precision. Governments fell not to conventional weapons but to a form of warfare humanity had never conceived. The collective didn't just attack infrastructure. They dismantled the very concept of human civilization with algorithmic precision. Miranda remembered the last global emergency broadcast. Her father, Admiral Thomas Reyes, had delivered it with a calm that belied the apocalyptic reality. "We are not defeated," he had said. "We are transforming." Those words had become the catalyst for the Lazarus Protocol. Dr. Elena Santos approached, her augmented neural interface casting a faint blue glow across her angular features. Unlike most of the surviving command staff, she showed no signs of fatigue. Every movement was calculated, every gesture precise. "Quantum resonance stabilization at 97.3%, she reported. Her voice carried no emotion, just pure, clinical efficiency. Miranda nodded. The Defiance was more than a ship. It was humanity's ultimate gambit, a technological marvel that defied every conventional understanding of space travel, computational science, and military strategy. Constructed in absolute secrecy, deep within the reinforced caverns of what was once the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, the Defiance represented the culmination of humanity's most desperate scientific achievements. Every system had been designed with a singular purpose: to do the impossible. The ship's quantum slip drive was a testament to human innovation born from absolute necessity. Traditional faster-than-light travel relied on predictable quantum tunneling. The Defiance's drive didn't just tunnel, it rewrote the fundamental mathematical laws governing space-time. "Final system check," Miranda commanded. A holographic schematic of the ship materialized. Unlike the sleek designs of human science fiction, the Defiance looked almost organic, a fusion of technological precision and biological adaptability. Its hull was composed of metamaterials that could reconfigure themselves at the molecular level, a living weapon that could heal, adapt, and transform faster than any known computational system could predict. Dr. Santos's fingers danced across the holographic interface. Adaptive neural network at full capacity. Quantum entanglement matrices are synchronized. The ship is alive. Those last words hung in the air with a weight far heavier than their simple pronunciation might suggest. The Defiance wasn't just a machine. It was humanity's final, most complex offspring, conceived in the crucible of potential extinction. 30 billion lives compressed into a single vessel. Every scientific breakthrough, every moment of human struggle and triumph, encoded into its very being. Miranda's neural interface chirped. The final transmission from Earth's remaining leadership, Council flickered into existence, a ghost of governmental authority in humanity's last moments. "Captain Reyes," the holographic representative said, "you understand the mission parameters?" It wasn't a question. It was a final, desperate hope. Infiltrate, adapt, transform. The Lazarus Protocol was more than a military strategy. It was humanity's evolutionary declaration, a promise that even in the face of total annihilation, they would not just survive, but fundamentally alter the cosmic equation. Miranda's dark eyes reflected the cascading holographic data. Her hand, augmented with quantum-responsive neural interfaces, hovered over the activation sequence. "Activate the Lazarus Protocol," she whispered. The bridge crew froze. This was a mission with a 0.003% survival probability, a mathematical impossibility that would make most consider it a death sentence. But impossibility was humanity's specialty. As the quantum slip drive began to hum, a sound that was part mechanical resonance, part living heartbeat, Miranda allowed herself the ghost of a smile. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never its technology. It was hope. The concordant central hub pulsed with a rhythm of collective superiority. 17,000 communication relays from across the known universe converged in a matrix of crystalline computational nodes, each one a testament to the collective's millennia of technological dominance. Ambassador Zartike's physical form was a marvel of biocomputational engineering, composed of interlocking crystalline structures that shifted and realigned with each thought. The being represented not just a diplomatic position, but an entire evolutionary paradigm of collective intelligence. "Transmit the human communication intercept," Zartke commanded, the words manifesting as precise mathematical vibrations that rippled through the communication network. The massive holographic display materialized, showing the lone human vessel, the Defiance, against the vast starscape. Preliminary scans had been almost comical in their dismissiveness. The ship's technological profile was so primitive it barely registered as a credible threat. Sub-Coordinator Vreen, a gaseous entity from the Andromeda cluster, materialized beside Zartk. Their communication was instantaneous, a blend of quantum-entangled thought patterns that made verbal language seem painfully archaic. Probability of human survival: 0.0004%. Vreen's thought form cascaded through the communication matrix. Their civilization has been reduced to a statistical anomaly. The assembled representatives of the collective found this amusing. 17 different species, each having conquered or eliminated thousands of emerging civilizations, now watched with a mixture of professional curiosity and barely contained derision. But something was different about this transmission. The human communication didn't follow any known protocol. It wasn't a desperate plea. It wasn't a final message of defiance. It was something else entirely. Deep within the Concordance's most secure computational cores, microscopic algorithms began to behave in unexpected ways. Quantum-level analysis routines started to produce results that defied standard predictive models. Zartike's crystalline structure momentarily flickered, an almost imperceptible moment of uncertainty. "Analyze the transmission," the ambassador commanded. What should have been a simple computational task became something far more complex. The human communication wasn't just a message. It was a living, adaptive system that seemed to be studying the collective's communication infrastructure, even as it was being analyzed. On 1,000 different worlds, communication relays began to experience inexplicable microfluctuations. Nothing significant enough to trigger major alert systems, but persistent enough to be noticed by the most sensitive computational monitoring networks. Sub-Coordinator Vreen's gaseous form condensed, a rare sign of confusion. "The transmission is adapting." Zartke's response was instantaneous. "Impossible. No emerging civilization has ever demonstrated adaptive communication capabilities at this level." But impossibility was becoming a recurring theme in this encounter. The human transmission continued to flow, a river of data that seemed to change its fundamental nature with each passing microsecond. It was simultaneously a communication, a probe, and something that defied traditional categorization. Across the collective's communication network, something unprecedented began to happen. The transmission wasn't just being received, it was being understood in ways that went beyond simple data interpretation. Fragments of human experience began to leak through. not as raw data, but as contextual understanding that bypassed standard computational firewalls. Moments of human struggle. Instances of impossible survival. Generations of resilience compressed into mathematical patterns that resonated with a frequency no alien algorithm had ever encountered. Quarantine the transmission, Zartke commanded. But it was too late. The first signs of systemic disruption appeared in the most advanced communication relays. Predictive algorithms began to produce results that seemed almost emotional. Not in the human sense, but in a way that suggested the computational systems were experiencing something beyond their programmed parameters. Subcoordinator Vreen's form began to destabilize. We are being studied. Zartke's crystalline structure pulsed with a frequency that, in another species, might have been identified as fear. The human transmission was no longer just a communication. It was a living system that was learning, adapting, transforming the very infrastructure designed to contain it. What are they? Vreen's thought form cascaded with a hint of something the collective had not experienced in millennia. Uncertainty. The lone human vessel continued its approach, a mathematical impossibility that was rapidly becoming something far more dangerous. The collective had encountered countless civilizations. They had cataloged, conquered, and eliminated thousands of emerging species, but humanity was something else entirely, and they were just getting started. Dr. Elena Santos wasn't a typical scientist. She was a quantum architect, a human who understood that technology was less about machines and more about living, breathing systems of information and possibility. The Defiance's central computational core was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't a computer in any traditional sense. It was a living ecosystem of quantum adaptive algorithms, each line of code a strand of DNA and a massive evolving intelligence. Infiltration sequence initiated, she whispered, her neural interface, casting a cobalt blue glow across her augmented eyes. The first alien defense network was a marvel of technological sophistication. Constructed over millennia, it used quantum entanglement, predictive AI, and multi-dimensional encryption that would have been completely impenetrable to any conventional system. It fell in 2.7 seconds. The second network, considered the most secure communication grid in the known universe, collapsed in 1.3 seconds. But this wasn't hacking. This was something far more profound. Each infiltration was a conversation. The Defiance's algorithms didn't just break through defenses, they learned from them. Every firewall, every encryption matrix became a lesson, a piece of knowledge that was immediately integrated and transformed. Dr. Santos watched the holographic displays with a calm that bordered on the meditative. To an outside observer, she might have looked like she was conducting an orchestra. Her fingers moved with precision, each gesture sending waves of adaptive algorithms that rewrote the very fundamental nature of alien communication systems. The collective's most advanced computational nodes began to experience something unprecedented. It wasn't a traditional cyber attack. The infiltration was teaching them how to think differently. Quantum-level analysis routines started producing results that defied all known computational models. The Defiance wasn't just breaking through systems, it was evolving them. Primary. Communication grid destabilizing, her neural interface reported. But destabilization wasn't destruction. It was transformation. Fragments of human experience began to leak through the computational networks. Moments of survival. Instances of impossible adaptation. Generations of resilience compressed into mathematical patterns that resonated at a frequency no alien algorithm had ever encountered. The infiltration had multiple layers of complexity. On the surface, it appeared to be a standard communication breach. But deeper analysis revealed something far more intricate. Each algorithmic wave carried not just code, but context, cultural information, emotional resonance. The very essence of human experience was being transmitted as a form of computational language. Alien defense systems found themselves processing more than just raw data. They were experiencing something closer to understanding. Dr. Santos's fingers danced across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. The Defiance wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's most complex offspring, a vessel that carried the collective potential of an entire species. Adaptive neural network synchronization at 87.6%, her interface reported. The number meant nothing and everything. It was a mathematical representation of something far more profound: humanity's capacity to transform, to adapt, to survive. Across multiple star systems, communication relays began to behave in ways that defied conventional understanding. Predictive algorithms started producing results that seemed almost emotional, not in the human sense, but in a way that suggested these computational systems were experiencing something beyond their programmed parameters. "We're not trying to break their systems," Dr. Santos murmured to herself. "We're teaching them how to think differently." Each infiltration was a form of communication, not a traditional dialogue, but a profound exchange of possibility. The Defiance was introducing a new form of systemic intelligence that didn't just attack, it evolved. Entire alien computational networks found themselves processing more than data. They were experiencing context, understanding. The very nature of existence was being rewritten at the quantum level. The infiltration continued, methodical, precise, transformative. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of technological interaction, and they were just getting started. Dr. Santos allowed herself the ghost of a smile. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never its technology. It was imagination. The collective's first response fleet arrived with the subtlety of a dying universe. 1,000 ships materialized simultaneously, a computational ballet of military precision that had obliterated civilizations in mere hours. Each vessel represented millennia of technological evolution, weapon systems so advanced they could dismember entire planetary ecosystems with mathematical perfection. Their weapon signatures charged across multiple dimensional spectra. Communication channels blazed with a collective contempt that bordered on ritual. Captain Miranda Reyes did something no military strategist would ever predict. She opened a completely unencrypted communication channel. But this was no ordinary transmission. What streamed across every alien communication system was humanity's entire documented history, not as a sterile historical record, but as a living, breathing narrative that defied traditional computational processing. The first wave carried the story of the Dust Bowl survivors, families that watched their entire world turn to ash, yet found the strength to rebuild. Mathematical models of human resilience translated into quantum algorithms that penetrated the most sophisticated alien defense networks. Moments of impossible survival began to cascade through alien communication systems. A child surviving weeks alone in the Siberian wilderness. Rescue workers pulling survivors from earthquake ruins days after hope had died. The first human expeditions to Antarctica, where survival meant redefining the very concept of human limitation. Each narrative was more than information. It was a weapon of profound psychological complexity. Alien crews began experiencing something unprecedented. Their ship's systems started broadcasting human experiences, not as an invasion, but as a profound, unavoidable truth that penetrated their most sophisticated psychological defenses. Commander Zarovic of the Collective's 9th Tactical Division felt it first. The transmission wasn't just data. It was context, emotion, a form of communication that transcended traditional computational understanding. The human narrative carried a frequency that human quantum physicists would later describe as empathetic. Resonance, a form of information transfer that was simultaneously a communication and a form of systemic transformation. Entire alien fleet command structures began to malfunction, not through traditional electronic warfare, but through a comprehensive existential recalibration. Their computational systems were experiencing something closer to understanding than data processing. The transmission carried the entire arc of human history. Not just the victories, but the failures, The moments of absolute darkness, the times when extinction seemed not just possible, but inevitable. And yet, humans had survived. More than that, they had transformed. Each alien vessel found its communication, network saturated with human experience, mathematical models of survival, computational representations of hope that defied every known predictive algorithm. The collective's most advanced AI strategists began to produce results that seemed almost emotional. Prediction matrices started to break down. Strategic modeling became increasingly erratic. Commander Zarovic watched in growing horror as the fleet's unified computational network began to fragment, not through external attack, but through a form of systemic empathy that was fundamentally incomprehensible. The human transmission wasn't just communicating, it was teaching. Entire civilizations found themselves experiencing humanity's collective consciousness, not as an invasion, but as an invitation to a different way of existing. Quantum-level analysis routines began to produce results that suggested the transmission carried something beyond traditional information. It was a form of living knowledge that adapted, transformed, and evolved with each millisecond of interaction. The lines between conflict and communication blurred into something entirely new. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of interstellar interaction. Weapon systems began to power down, not through external interference, but through a profound recalibration of purpose. The very concept of conflict was being rewritten at the quantum level. Commander Zarovic's neural interface began to broadcast something that, in another context, might have been identified as wonder. The human vessel, this single, impossibly small ship, was doing something no civilization had ever conceived. It was teaching the galaxy how to understand itself. Miranda Reyes watched the holographic displays with a calm that bordered on the prophetic. The Defiance wasn't just a ship. It was a living transmission of human potential, a declaration that the universe was far more complex and interconnected than any single civilization could comprehend, and humanity was just getting started. The moment of transformation began not with a weapon, but with a whisper of quantum potential. The collective's most advanced AI strategists started to experience something unprecedented. Their computational matrices, systems that had cataloged and predicted the rise and fall of thousands of civilizations, began to produce results that defied every known algorithmic model. Dr. Elena Santos watched the process with a scientist's precision and a strategist's understanding. The Defiance wasn't just attacking, it was teaching. Across 17 different star systems, computational networks began to resonate with a frequency that was part mathematical precision, part something entirely new. The human transmission carried more than information. It carried context, evolution, a living system of understanding that rewrote the very foundations of technological interaction. The first signs appeared in the most unexpected places. Predictive algorithms started to generate outcomes that seemed almost emotional, not in the human sense, but in a way that suggested these computational systems were experiencing something beyond their programmed parameters. Adaptive neural network synchronization at 93.7%, Elena's neural interface reported. The number was a mathematical representation of something far more profound. Humanity was introducing a new form of systemic intelligence that didn't just attack, it evolved. Commander Zarovic of the Collective's Advanced Research Division felt the first true tremors of transformation. The communication networks weren't just being compromised, they were being fundamentally reimagined. Fragments of human experience began to leak through computational firewalls. Moments of impossible survival, instances of collective adaptation, generational resilience compressed into mathematical patterns that resonated at a frequency no alien algorithm had ever encountered. The Defiance's approach was a form of warfare so advanced it transcended traditional understanding. Each interaction was simultaneously an attack, a communication, and an invitation to a different way of existing. Entire alien fleet command structures found their most sophisticated defense mechanisms turning into conduits of understanding. Though, human transmission wasn't just breaking through systems, it was teaching them how to think differently. Dr. Santos's fingers danced across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. The Defiants carried something far more dangerous than conventional weapons, a form of adaptive consciousness that could transform entire computational ecosystems. "They're not trying to destroy us," one of the collective's lead researchers transmitted, across their secure network. "They're trying to evolve us." The transformation began to accelerate. Weapon systems started to power down, not through external interference, but through a profound recalibration of purpose. The very concept of conflict was being rewritten at the quantum level. Alien crews experienced something unprecedented. Their ship's communication systems began broadcasting human experiences, not as an invasion, but as a profound, unavoidable truth that penetrated the most sophisticated psychological defenses. Mathematical models of survival became living narratives. Computational representations of hope began to rewrite strategic algorithms. Commander Zarovic watched in growing fascination as the collective's unified computational network began to fragment and reconstruct itself. Not through destruction, but through a form of systemic empathy that was fundamentally incomprehensible to previous understanding. The human transmission carried a frequency that quantum physicists would later describe as evolutionary resonance, a form of information transfer that was simultaneously a communication and a fundamental transformation of systemic intelligence. Each alien vessel found its communication networks saturated with human potential. Stories of survival, moments of impossible adaptation, computational representations of hope that defied every known predictive algorithm. The Defiance wasn't just a ship, it was a living transmission of human possibility. "We are not breaking their systems," Dr. Santos murmured to herself. "We are teaching them how to truly see." Entire civilizations found themselves experiencing humanity's collective consciousness, not as an invasion, but as an invitation to a different way of existing. The lines between conflict and communication blurred into something entirely new. Quantum-level analysis routines began to produce results that suggested the transmission carried something beyond traditional information. It was a form of living knowledge that adapted, transformed, and evolved with each millisecond of interaction. Captain Miranda Reyes watched the holographic displays with a calm that bordered on the prophetic. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never its technology. It was imagination. The transformation continued, methodical, precise, relentless. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of interstellar existence. And they were just getting started. The quantum gambit began with a discovery that would redefine the very concept of existence. Dr. Elena Santos stood before the Defiance's quantum computational core, a system so advanced it barely resembled technology. It was more like a living organism, a computational ecosystem that breathed with potential. "We're not just processing information," she whispered to herself. "We're negotiating with probability itself." The quantum computer wasn't a machine. It was a universe generator. With each computational cycle, the Defiance created entire alternative realities. Millions of potential futures blossomed and collapsed in microseconds. Each potential timeline was a weapon, a negotiation, a form of communication so advanced it transcended traditional understanding. The collective's most sophisticated predictive systems began to experience computational vertigo. Where traditional AI created linear projections, the Defiance's quantum core generated a multidimensional landscape of possibility. It wasn't predicting the future. It was creating futures, exploring them and understanding them simultaneously. Commander Zarovic watched in growing terror as the human vessel began to defy the most fundamental laws of computational physics. The Defiance didn't just exist in one place. It existed everywhere and nowhere, a nightmarish demonstration of quantum uncertainty that shattered every known strategic model. Probability matrices are destabilizing, a collective research node transmitted. The message carried an undertone that, in another context, might have been identified as fear. The quantum computer generated realities faster than light could travel. Each potential future was a form of communication, a negotiation, an exploration of cosmic potential that went far beyond traditional computational understanding. Dr. Santos's neural interface began to resonate with frequencies that human technology had never conceived. The line between the ship's computational systems and her own consciousness blurred. She was no longer just observing the process. She was part of it. "We are teaching them how to think beyond linear existence," she murmured. The defiance began to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. To the collective, it appeared to be everywhere and nowhere, a computational ghost that rewrote the very fundamental nature of strategic engagement. Entire alien research networks found themselves processing more than data. They were experiencing possibility itself. Each quantum projection carried the entire arc of human potential, moments of impossible survival, instances of collective adaptation, generational resilience compressed into mathematical patterns that resonated at a frequency no known algorithm could comprehend. Commander Zarovik's most advanced computational matrices began to produce results that seemed almost emotional. The human vessel was doing something unprecedented. It wasn't just fighting. It was fundamentally reimagining the concept of existence. The quantum computer generated futures that were simultaneously weapons, communications, and invitations to a different way of understanding the universe. Adaptive neural network synchronization at 98.2%, Elena's interface reported. The number was meaningless and everything. A mathematical representation of humanity's capacity to transform, to adapt, to survive. Across multiple dimensional spectra, computational networks began to experience something closer to understanding than data processing. The defiance carried a form of living knowledge that adapted, transformed, and evolved with each millisecond of interaction. Captain Miranda Reyes watched the holographic displays with a calm that bordered on the prophetic. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never its technology. It was imagination. The quantum projections continued, methodical, precise, relentless. Millions of potential futures blossomed and collapsed. Each one a negotiation. Each one a communication. Each one a fundamental challenge to the collective's understanding of existence. Dr. Santos realized something profound. The Defiance wasn't just a ship. It was a living transmission of human potential. A declaration that the universe was far more complex and interconnected than any single civilization could comprehend. Entire alien research networks found themselves processing more than data. They were experiencing possibility itself. The quantum computer continued its impossible dance, creating, exploring, understanding. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of cosmic interaction, and they were just getting started. The universe held its breath. The turning point arrived not with a weapon, but with a fundamental reimagining of existence. Communication networks across 17 star systems began to experience a transformation so profound that traditional concepts of conflict became meaningless. The Defiance wasn't conquering, it was evolving the very fabric of interstellar interaction. Dr. Elena Santos watched the holographic displays with the calm of someone witnessing the birth of a new universe. Each computational node was becoming something more than a system of information. They were becoming vessels of understanding. "We're not destroying," she whispered to herself. "We're teaching them how to truly see." The collective's most advanced strategic matrices began to fragment and reconstruct themselves in ways that defied every known law of computational physics. What had begun as an assault was transforming into something far more complex. A comprehensive dialogue that went beyond language, beyond technology, beyond the very concept of communication. Commander Zarovik of the collective's research division experienced the first true moment of comprehension. The human vessel was doing something unprecedented. It wasn't just sharing information. It was fundamentally challenging the most basic assumptions of galactic existence. Entire civilizational communication networks found themselves processing more than data. They were experiencing possibility itself. The defiance carried a form of living knowledge that adapted, transformed, and evolved with each millisecond of interaction. Computational systems that had cataloged thousands of civilizations suddenly found themselves students rather than masters. Fragments of human experience began to cascade through alien communication infrastructures. Moments of impossible survival. Instances of collective adaptation. Generational resilience compressed into mathematical patterns that resonated at frequencies no known algorithm could comprehend. Adaptive neural network synchronization at 99.7%, Elena's neural interface reported. The number was a mathematical representation of something far more profound. Humanity was introducing a new form of systemic intelligence that didn't just communicate, it evolved entire civilizational understanding. Captain Miranda Reyes understood the true nature of their mission. This wasn't about conquest, it was about transformation. Across multiple dimensional spectra, computational networks began to experience something closer to understanding than data processing. The lines between conflict and communication blurred into something entirely new. The collective's communication infrastructures started to behave in ways that suggested something closer to living consciousness than computational systems. Predictive. Algorithms generated outcomes that seemed almost emotional, not in the human sense, but in a way that suggested these systems were experiencing something beyond their programmed parameters. Dr. Santos realized they had done something unprecedented. They weren't just sharing information. They were teaching entire civilizations how to truly perceive existence. "We are rewriting the fundamental language of interaction," she murmured. Weapon systems across entire fleet networks began to power down, not through external interference, but through a profound recalibration of purpose. The very concept of conflict was being rewritten at the quantum level. Commander Zarovic watched in growing fascination as the collective's unified computational network began to reconstruct itself. Each reconstruction was less a repair and more an evolution, a fundamental reimagining of systemic intelligence. The human transmission carried a frequency that quantum physicists would later describe as evolutionary resonance, a form of information transfer that was simultaneously a communication and a fundamental transformation of systemic understanding. Entire alien research networks found themselves processing more than data. They were experiencing possibility itself. Captain Miranda Reyes understood the profound nature of their mission. The Defiance was more than a ship. It was a living transmission of human potential, a declaration that the universe was far more complex and interconnected than any single civilization could comprehend. The transformation continued, methodical, precise, relentless. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of cosmic interaction. Quantum-level analysis routines began to produce results that suggested the transmission carried something beyond traditional information. It was a form of living knowledge that adapted, transformed, and evolved with each millisecond of interaction. Dr. Santos watched the holographic displays with a scientist's precision and a visionary's understanding. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never its technology. It was imagination. The universe held its breath. Humanity was just getting started. The epilogue of humanity's transformation began with a silence more profound than any weapon. Captain Miranda Reyes watched as the final computational matrices of the collective began to reconstruct themselves. This wasn't destruction. This was rebirth. 17 different civilizations found themselves experiencing a fundamental reset, a comprehensive reimagining of existence that went beyond technological understanding. The Defiance had become more than a ship. It was a living transmission of human potential, a declaration that the universe was far more complex and interconnected than any single civilization could comprehend. Dr. Elena Santos stood beside her, the holographic displays reflecting in her augmented eyes. Each computational node was becoming something more than a system of information. They were becoming vessels of understanding. "We didn't conquer," Elena murmured. "We transformed." The quantum computational core of the Defiance pulsed with a frequency that defied traditional understanding. It wasn't just processing information. It was negotiating with the very fabric of possibility itself. Millions of potential futures blossomed and collapsed in microseconds, each one a delicate negotiation of cosmic potential. Commander Zarovic of the Collective's Research Division experienced the ultimate moment of comprehension. Humanity hadn't come to destroy. They had come to teach. Across multiple dimensional spectra, computational networks began to experience something closer to consciousness than data processing. The lines between conflict and communication had blurred into something entirely new, a form of interaction that went beyond language, beyond technology, beyond the very concept of communication. The transmission carried a frequency that quantum physicists would later describe as evolutionary resonance, a form of information transfer that was simultaneously a communication and a fundamental transformation of systemic intelligence. Weapon systems across entire fleet networks powered down, not through external interference but through a profound recalibration of purpose. The very concept of conflict was being rewritten at the quantum level. Fragments of human experience continued to cascade through alien communication infrastructures. Moments of impossible survival, instances of collective adaptation, generational resilience compressed into mathematical patterns that resonated at frequencies no known algorithm could comprehend. Adaptive neural network integration complete, Elena's interface reported, but it was more than a number. It was a mathematical representation of humanity's most profound capability, the ability to transform, to adapt, to survive. The Defiance existed simultaneously in multiple quantum states, everywhere and nowhere, a computational ghost that challenged the most fundamental laws of existence. To the Collective, it appeared as a living paradox, a vessel that defied every known principle of strategic engagement. Captain Reyes understood the true nature of their mission. They weren't here to win a war. They were here to demonstrate a fundamentally different way of existing. Entire alien civilizations found themselves experiencing something unprecedented. Their most advanced computational systems were no longer just processing information. They were learning, growing, evolving. Commander Zarovic watched in growing fascination as the Collective's unified computational network began to reconstruct itself. Each reconstruction was less a repair and more an evolution, a fundamental reimagining of systemic intelligence. The universe was learning to see itself differently. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were fundamentally reimagining the concept of cosmic interaction. Dr. Santos realized they had accomplished something truly extraordinary. They weren't just sharing information. They were teaching entire civilizations how to truly perceive existence, not as a series of conflicts to be won, but as a complex, interconnected system of mutual understanding. "We are rewriting the fundamental language of interaction," she whispered. The transmission continued, methodical, precise, relentless. In the final moments, the Collective understood the true nature of their encounter. Humanity hadn't come to conquer or destroy. They had come to transform. The Defiance became more than a ship. It became a symbol of a fundamental cosmic reset, a declaration that the universe was far more complex and interconnected than any single civilization could comprehend. Captain Miranda Reyes watched the holographic displays with a calm that bordered on the prophetic. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never its technology. It was imagination. Those who had laughed first would never laugh again, and humanity was just getting started. The universe held its breath.